Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our online conversation. My name is Kirsten. I'm based in Inverness in the Scottish Highlands, and I'm here just to support with any of the technical issues today. I'm part of Circus Art Space, and we're an artist collective based in Inverness. We think that's probably all I'm going to say. I'm going to hand over to Fadzai, who will chair the meeting today. But just welcome everyone, and I'm looking forward to it.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. It's a bit early and I still haven't had my coffee yet, but I think we'll be fine. Welcome to the RotU online series of events. I don't know if Layla is going to speak a little bit about RotU and explain what it is. Basically, it's a collective in Scotland, and we're doing a series of events online for the month of October. And this is my presentation of my climate change project. I've invited guests and welcomed the guys from Zimbabwe because we are looking at having conversations with people we generally don't hear from about the climate crisis. And as artists, I just thought we could have a forum, a little discussion about how it affects our work. So the script goes, we've got a program. Maybe you want to talk about
my name's Ewan Bush, I'm Fudge's partner. I'm in the same house, but on an iPhone. She's asked me to talk about the video that was playing earlier. So I think it was about 3 years ago, we were in Zimbabwe and we went to Eastern Highlands and we were in Harare and we got to know some guys that were living next door actually. And I had a nice new camera at the time and ended up going and filming with them while they were doing a session. So essentially that's what that was, a sort of afternoon with the guys playing Mbira, the Mbira Kanaka crew, they call themselves. And I'd also been to Vic Falls, as you do, so I had filmed there. And then I sort of thought, well, there's a nice little theme going here with the water and the Eastern Highlands and the images from there. And sort of trying to look at understand some of the sort of cultural beliefs in Zimbabwe with the spirits and the ancestors and get a bit of understanding of that. So I don't speak Shona, but they explain some of the songs to me and they do in the video as well. So you're welcome to watch that on Vimeo or go there if you feel like seeing the whole thing.
Just to add to that, the images in the video, some of you may have missed, but we'll play it as an outro as well. There's the abundance of water in Chimani Mani. There's a scene where we get to the river and we see that river. And there's also the image of, and the wonderful thunderous sound of the Vic Falls. When we went there, it was really full. Apparently though, and I would like maybe confirmation from someone near Vic Falls, the guys in Bulawayo, I've heard that it's actually got no water at some point, or it's quite dry. Is that true? But certainly in Chimani Mani, there was the cyclone Idai, which was a huge cyclone. I think it was a climate impact, and that really devastated the Eastern Highland. So in that video, you see what was before, but it's not quite what's there now. I don't know if anyone from Bulawayo wants to confirm the Vic issue.
Yes, we saw horrendous images from there at the time with that area is probably washed away completely now, I imagine. Huge boulders and earth being shifted and landslides, and the rivers were flooding and washing homes away. People were killed and villages cut off. So it was a very dramatic event, and it was triggered by an unusual event in the Indian Ocean that caused this hurricane or cyclone, and there are likely to be others like that. Obviously Mozambique, it's bordering Mozambique, so it's the same area essentially.
Hi everybody, Clifford here, just trying to sort out some IT things. Just to maybe respond to the Victoria Falls issue. So the Victoria Falls has got a high tide and a low tide. So probably some images that were circulating could have been during the low tide. But at the moment, it's thundering as usual, and there are plenty more than usual water currently running down the Zambezi and the Victoria Falls. So yeah, at the moment, it's good.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good to hear. I guess we should go ahead with the program and look at what the program is. To introduce myself, my name is Fadzai Mwakutuya. I'm an artist based in Scotland in the Highlands. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I got involved with climate action stuff by living in the Highlands. It just became more visible around me, climate discussions, because there's a lot of exhibitions, a lot of water, a lot of incidents of why climate is an issue to really discuss here. We also have Layla, who has been really pivotal in this whole event, because it is through Layla that the collective RotU came together. And she's going to present something about the whole project. And that's some of my work that Kirsten's showing, talking about materials and artwork, and looking at how climate or how environmental we can be with our work. So I choose to use found objects, like most people these days. And I like the dichotomy of juxtaposing political imagery with beautiful imagery, because a lot of people imagine that when you're discussing climate or politics, it has to be quite grotesque. But I enjoy making it all quite presentable and interesting and something you can live with in the house. So this is the piece I did. It's called Wooden Planet, and it combines a Scottish hanging basket and a Zimbabwean basket. Actually, that's from Bulawayo, that piece, the basket. And I really enjoyed making that piece because it sort of brought together the Scottish influence and my heritage as well, using found materials. So my work does speak to the environment somehow. It's not always about the environment, but I like to use, to repurpose materials for my work. I did this image for my website, Climate Change Creative, which I created under the research sort of element we did with RotU. And I was trying to depict banners that are impactful, things that people can carry in protest marches that speak volumes in visuals rather than words, because I think that visual language is universal. And I think protests should include the voices of other communities, not only the global north. So that's my depiction of, if I was to make a banner about climate change, that would be it. And I really enjoy the process I use, which is a blowtorch, and just random sort of imagery that doesn't always have to be too serious, but is impactful. So that's generally me. And who are we going to next, Kirsten?
It would be Layla for an introduction to RotU.
Okay. Hi, Layla. Could you introduce RotU to us, please, and who you are?
Okay, thank you, Fudge, for that excellent introduction. And I apologise, I realise I'm sitting on my table and I was painting last night, so it's covered in crinkly things. It's so lovely to see so many people here as part of Fudge said her project. So the repository of the Undercommons, called RotU for short, because it's quite a long title, is a group of artists who've been working together since last year. At first trying to figure out how we can talk about climate change in ways that discuss in ways that make sure that everybody's voice is being heard, like in the conversation, because at the moment, or at least recently, it's been very much centered like in a sort of Western world perspective and not really looking at what impact that's been happening, like, or what impact that's been having across the whole world. And yeah, a term that I don't really like using, but the global south. So Fudge is part of that collective, and alongside Chris, Chris Nalini, Verbena Blue Collective, Jamie Temple, Nasheen, been working just to try and get some of these ideas related to anti-capitalism and climate change out into the world. So we were supposed to be working towards an exhibition for this year, but with the COVID crisis, that's obviously changed things significantly. So we changed our programme of work to something called Encountering Crisis and Remaking Futures. And that's the kind of online programme of work, which we understand is difficult with it being online because not a lot of people have access to online spaces either. So we're also trying to make sure that we're doing things offline. We created a little zine together, and as Fudge was saying, this is part of our online series of events. So we're trying to build solidarity with today's struggles. And over the month of October, we're releasing, content via YouTube, video content, as well as audio content. And again, we said we've got a physical zine for anybody that wants to receive it. We can arrange to get it sent out to you. And you can tune in and just see what it is that some of the artists are talking about. And I'll just share a link to that at the moment. I don't want to take up too much space here. So I think that's it. If you want to find out some of the content, there's already 2 videos up there just now, which will give you some interviews with the artists who are involved, and you can see how well we've been getting on or not over the past year. And Chris Manson, he has some of his videos up which combines climate change science with comic book illustrations, and he's put that together into videos, and Fudge has just put up one of her podcasts. So I hope everybody enjoys tonight. Tonight? No, but it's only morning. It's still only morning. I hope everybody enjoys today, and yeah, thanks to Fudge and Circus Arts for getting this together.
Okay, thank you, Layla. I'll just run through the program as I look at it here. So we've got Layla, and we'll put links in the chat, guys. If there's any sort of questions or communication you want to sort of relate, could you just put it in the chat so that we don't stop and start? We're trying to get to the breakout rooms so everyone can start talking. Okay, so basically the program, Morag Smith is an artist based in the Highlands, and she's going to present how art and protest has influenced her own practice. We'll share some images of her work. And then I'm going to talk about David Cass's work. He created the climate change website for me, so he's quite integral in this project. But right now, he's in London doing an exhibition and curating something, so he couldn't make it this morning. But he gave me permission to share his website. And then we have George from BAB in Blair. He's going to speak on behalf of his artist community and demonstrate how climate issues, if any, are addressed in any of their work. And I can say, George, if we have time, maybe Amber or one of the artists can speak quickly about why they use those materials. And then we also have a presentation from Chico Chazunguza, my longtime friend. He used to be my art lecturer as well, I think at some point in Zimbabwe, and he's an amazing artist, and he's going to tell us about Zimbabwe Arts and Cultural Trusts. I think that's correct, Chico. You can correct me in the chat. And he's going to speak about his work and how it relates to our topic today. And then we have Buto or Clifford to speak about how the National Gallery of Blair as a major organization and how they're leading on climate action. They've been doing some sustainable input at the gallery, so that's quite nice to see. And also a little bit maybe about how it touches on degrowth and decolonization. And then we're going to have breakout rooms of about 8 minutes each. We aim to have 2 so that we can have a mix of conversations. And again, guys, could you just register your chat in the chat box, because we might not have time to feedback on everyone's thoughts. And then I'll make closing comments, hopefully at about 12:30. Okay, so that's the running program. So as we are, we've had Layla and now Morag, please.
Hi, thank you, Fudge, and thank you for asking me to come and share. It's always good to get a chance to reflect on my practice and climate activism. So I'm a visual artist living in Nairn in the north of Scotland in the Highlands, and I'm also a member of Extinction Rebellion. And I'll just start with telling you a little bit about my practice. So I mainly work in sculptural installation, very abstract. And materials that I've been using of late are concrete, resin and plaster, which are wholly non-environmentally friendly materials. I do also use found materials, bits of wood that I find washed up in the beach, but I do seem to be stuck in a cycle of concrete at the moment. And my practice is kind of influenced by ideas of place. So what's taken from the landscape of the Highlands of Scotland, abstracted down with notions of place. So for me, that's thinking about memory and my experience of being in a place, the history, generational history and geology, and also how it makes me feel, the sort of emotional content. Could we move on to the next slide, Kirsten? Thank you. So this is my Extinction Rebellion images. So I've found myself as the arts coordinator of my local Inverness group, and we are involved in creating pieces of artwork that visually communicate the actions. And this particular action was the highlighting the huge sums of money that the banks are loaning to the fossil fuels industry, trillions. So we went around to 3 worst polluting banks in Inverness, cleaning them, and we had a speaker, and we made huge, I made these giant checks that we had the bank manager presenting to the oil baron. So they're good, fun events to be at. And we do try to make them fun and to have the sort of visual communication of the artworks, as well as being educational and hopefully inspiring. And we use, reuse, we upcycle, we forage for materials, sort of maintaining the ethos of Extinction Rebellion. So that was a really good action to be involved in, a local action. And as regards how it influenced my own practice, so originally I sort of saw them as 2 very separate things. I had my sort of place and landscape and my climate activism, but they are slowly coming together. Seriously thinking about the materials that I use, concrete and resin. Somebody said to me that you're not using very much, it's not really going to matter, but I keep thinking in my head, this resin is going to be here in 500 years time. So I'm going to begin to explore using other materials like hempcrete and bioresin. I'm also thinking about the speed that I work at. So in Extinction Rebellion, it's all very fast. We have to very quickly make pieces of artwork. And I've actually found this to be very freeing, less sort of deep thinking for long periods of time about pieces of art. And I think this is something that I can move into my own practice. Particularly I want to start creating some climate change posters, using old 1950s travel posters as the kind of vehicle to express what I want to say. And I would hope to be able to exhibit these and then pass them on to Extinction Rebellion to use, or other groups. It's also got me thinking about the ideas of place on a global scale. So rather than just thinking about why we place in the Highlands, you know, we all live in the one planet, and without this, well, there's nowhere to go. And it also makes me think about my part in the consumerist capitalist cycle. So as an artist, I obviously am wanting, well, it would be nice to be selling my art, but who am I selling it to? As part of the capitalist system. So I do have a sort of struggle with this, yeah, still trying to think about how to sort of get that disconnect. What can I do about that? But it's been really good looking at your images, Fudge, that you were showing, especially the placards. So I think I'd like to take away from today, taking some of my art practice about place into the Extinction Rebellion placards, and I suppose making them a bit more artistic, maybe less literal. So yeah, thank you very much. That's me. I hope that's not over time.
I just couldn't help thinking whilst you were talking there, Morag, about the capitalist element and how we're probably, if you're like me, a struggling artist hoping to sell to someone wealthy. And in that way, if we're being considerate of non-capitalism and things like that, surely the imagery we should promote when we're selling our work is something that is informative and educative. So maybe that informs the materials we use when we're making art, is the notion that we're informing and educating as we sell. And hopefully that feeds back to the community somehow in a sort of empathetic way with the person who buys our work. I don't know. It's quite, I know what you mean, like, how do you deal with the two sort of conflicting needs? Okay, next on our progress. Kirsten, I saw someone with a raised hand, and do we just want to suggest that people can put questions in the chat, and then we can probably look at the questions during the breakout rooms and try and address them when we come back?
Yeah, good idea.
Of time. Okay. So next is David Cass, is the guy who works predominantly, his work is focused on looking at rising sea levels. And I met him when he came and showed his work in an exhibition in a gallery here called Untitled Chapter. And the funny thing about this exhibition that he curated, that we were all meant to hand in some sort of climate change image, and I couldn't relate to doing any work because I didn't quite get how I could do sea levels rising when I'm coming from a landlocked country, and my mind was caught up in this dilemma of trying to represent the sea. And then anyway, the exhibition went, I didn't submit anything. But later I started thinking about the narratives of climate imagery and how we don't see stuff that's happening in artwork in terms of climate action. Well, I haven't seen it. I need to look around a bit more if there is. But this is David's website. He's agreed that we share it on the Zoom, and yeah, basically what he does, he goes and into charity shops or places where they sell old things, and he buys them and makes his statement about sea levels rising in those pieces of work. So it's quite important to highlight his project, which we can all take part in, which is called Where Once the Oceans Were. And I took this project and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this isn't really inclusive of me because I come from a landlocked country. But I did take part in it, and it's quite interesting what came out as a result. Basically, he's asking if you would like to take part, to feel free. It's a survey to collect sea level data specific to each of us. So what you do is you supply your name, your date of birth and birthplace, and he does an investigation about how much the sea level has risen closest to where you are, or stuff like that. So I just said I was from Chimanimani, closer to Mozambique, so I could get a bit of sort of history on how much water or some sort of statistic water levels had risen. So he's showing this as a part of the 2022 Venice Biennale, and I think he's going to feed back on the responses. So it's quite a nice way to get involved in other people's projects and be part of a bigger artwork. So I think that's quite important, to be a collective voice about climate. So yeah, that's David's project, and he said he did the website for me, where I hope you guys will put your artwork in about climate. It's called Climate Change Creative, and there's a lot of information on the website about how to upload your images. And there's also terms and conditions, so just look through that. But that's a project I worked with him on, and that was part of the RotU funding. Okay, I think that's that. And who's next? Hi, George. So do you want to introduce yourself? And thank you for coming and joining all the way from Zimbabwe.
Hello, guys. Yeah, I'm George Masarira. I'm the chairperson of Visual Artists Association of Bulawayo, which is an association for artists in Bulawayo. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about it. It's a member-driven association. It was founded in 1983. And it's there to promote artists and also give platforms and also create opportunities for them. Then I just want to talk about the involvement of artists in, who are practicing here in Bulawayo, who are very well vexed about climate change. There's a young artist that I met, I think sometime last year, called Ember. She does so amazing work about picking up things from the street, and she tries to create a certain content around those lines. I don't want to speak much about her work. She was going to probably, if she's given a chance, she's going to talk about her own narratives. And there is a guy called Danisile Ncube. He also uses scrap metals. And most of his, he has been recycling since he started his practice. This is his work. So I don't want to talk about his narratives also. So in Bulawayo, we are very energetic in terms of experimental work. We try by all means to come up with ideas on how we can come up with something different to show into the world. And I'm happy to be part of an association that has got artists who are experimental, who want to create a little bit of change in the society or in a global perspective. So these are some of the artists that I just want to talk about, and that's what we do in Bulawayo, and that's fab for you. And we're looking forward to also venture into future collaborations with Fadzai and her initiatives. And I like the idea that she came up with, an idea that also involves us as citizens, as global citizens, to say, let's take care of our own world, because if we don't do that, we are not going to make any changes in this world. So by so doing, I'm very keen to be part of the process, and also try to create future collaborations so that we can also advocate for change, for climate change. Yeah. So that's what I can say for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does Amber want to present anything or say anything about her work?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for hosting this. It's inspiring.
Thank you. It's nice
I don't
work.
have much to say.
Why do
Thank
you
you.
use the materials you use, Amber? Why not just just
Well, I haven't actually bought anything. I don't buy any materials for my art. I prefer to source everything from diving in rubbish bins and collecting things off the street because I don't want to add to the consumerism culture. So yes, so I've sourced everything from the rubbish.
fantastic? And what does is that traditionally the way you've always worked, or is this a new sort of format?
So I've grown up. My mum also does recycling. She recycles glass bottles to make all sorts of type of chandeliers and glasses and mirrors. So from a young age, I've learned how to use these materials and turn them into something useful.
Cool. Thank you for that. Is anyone else want to speak?
I don't know.
About
Danisile, are you there?
Sorry for putting you on the spot. But it'd be nice to hear your voice.
Hey, Danisile.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, how are you, Fadzai? And everyone. Yeah. Well, talking about my work also, my shop or my supermarket usually becomes the dump site, whereby I go to dump sites and pick up other materials that I want to use. And then sometimes the other place that I go shop around is where scrap metal is actually gathered together for sale, sometimes for sale or for recycling again. But sometimes lately, let me say lately, I've had an experience whereby most of the implements that I was using were farm implements after the farm invasions, and to make furniture out of them, and also to make the kind of masks that I'm actually experimenting on, and most of the work that I do out of scrap. Unfortunately, now the world has changed. Mostly the farm implements that were actually collected from those farms has been sent to my supermarket, which now I can't even afford to buy the materials from, which is the metal scrap yards. And those metal scrap yards, they've taken the materials to South Africa for recycling. Therefore, right now I'm running short of my kind of materials, of which later on, and according to what Fadzai and others are doing within this group, right, it has also gave me an opportunity to now diversify and experiment rather than concentrating on my traditional materials. Now I can also come up with new materials that I can use. Maybe I can venture into plastic because plastic is now even filled up in all those dump sites that we have. Once I use plastic, at least I can manage to be part of that little man in this world that can also clean the world.
Wow, that's very nice, Dennis. That's really interesting. And yes, we do have to sort of diversify our materials according to the situation, because that shouldn't stop us in our tracks to express ourselves if the resources are scant on the ground. For instance, there's a time when I came to Scotland, I became very interested in the ways they use traditional, in their history of making dyes. I decided that my work was going to be all natural. I wasn't going to use any synthetic material from beginning to end. So I used the Sadza textile technique, the Sadza painting from Zimbabwe. And I wanted it to be natural all the way. So I researched pigments and processes that the Scots used to use traditionally to tie in with my environment. And then I realized that I could actually always do that because I would be taking the resources from the planet, like that lichen and the stuff that you forage for to make natural dyes, I started feeling quite guilty whilst I was doing that process of picking lichen and using other sort of natural materials of the land. So I had to adapt that and just think that maybe I could just do a small piece with the lichen and then have it digitally blown up for the big piece, to get an image of the big piece. I couldn't literally take a whole load of lichen and then just make my dye to make a big textile. So I think we're learning to adapt with as we work with the environment in our materials.
Next is Chica.
Hi, Chico. Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, the one speaking now, yeah.
Okay. How are you all doing?
We're all fine. I think I'm speaking on everyone's behalf.
I thought the response would be like that since we speak in English. But when we're speaking in Shona, it's always Magadi. And then people say, we are well if you are well. So it's always sounds.
We are well if you are well.
So thank you for having me on this platform. I think it's a very good platform which will take place every month. What I have here, I'm actually Zimbabwe Art Interaction Trust venue. Zimbabwe Arts and Culture Interactions Trust is, I am at Zimbabwe Arts and Culture Interactions was founded by myself after a long journey of teaching and also doing studio work. So I joined together with other colleagues who are into culture. The reason having been that, well, I grew up in a colonized system, went to school in a colonized system, and then after went to school to learn in the very system that similarly had colonized us. So I went to study in Europe. That's where I studied art. So that alone kind of awakened me in some way. It changed the way I worked. I studied in Bulgaria, and the approach to art education there is very sort of Eurocentric. European classic art is what they deal with, which is very good. But I also realized I did not necessarily belong to that system or that realm. So it impacted my personal work a lot. I also taught for many years, like Fadzai said earlier, I taught for many years. And I realized again, I was teaching in a system that was sort of a victim of colonialism itself. I'm sure we'll all agree here that art education itself is very Eurocentric. You may be studying in Zimbabwe, you may be studying in Zambia, but when it comes to that aspect, which is called art history or art theory, normally it's very European. It sounds like that's the status quo the world over. So basically, after having taught for many years, I actually realized there was need for another space, an alternative space that would bring aspects of the idea of Zimbabwe Arts and Culture Interactions has been to bring into the forefront the cultural elements that are supposed to be part and parcel of our contemporary creativity. There was no way we could get that. The moment you enter an art school, you are told, that's when you are taught about the HB and the B pencil and the colors and the like. But all those other artworks you have always been doing, which is like the wirecraft drawing with a line, completely out. The playing around with clay is seen different in that art school. So we want to bring the elements that come out of the culture that artists can now use in their contemporary work. So over the years, we've mentored quite a number of artists, some of them who are who have become very prominent. We've mentored them at Zimbabwe, Gareth Nyandoros, the Portia Jovairas, Virginia Chiota, Terence Msekio. They all came out of our mentorship programs. We're furthered now into building the site itself. There's an element of African culture that has been neglected. It's not talked about a lot, which is the architecture, African architecture. So what we have here at Zimbabwe right now is a space of like 17 hectares. And in this 17 hectares, we're actually building what we call the All Africa Village. It may not sound like the normal art that people do, or that which is regarded as art. But basically, for me and my colleagues here, this is like a huge installation. We're getting into some realism, if I may call it, of creating. So we're actually adopting architectural styles from the indigenous cultures in Africa.
Okay, so that's Chikot Zimbabwe Arts and Culture Interactions Facebook page.
Yeah, those pages, yeah, that's more recent. So, for example, yes, these are examples of such as we will be building. And these, for us here, these are structures that are on their own very friendly to nature, very friendly to Mother Nature, as all the objects that are used in construction are very natural. It's poles, wooden poles, it's clay, which is the earth, and it's grass, basically. And it's like bringing a question to what kind of architecture should our people be using here? Because normally now you have all these artificial materials, things that are not even degradable. And the world is talking about, you know, eco-friendly architecture. In Africa, we've always had eco-friendly architecture, and we want people to revisit this and now get to understand it more. We're also bringing in the intangible culture itself. We want people to recognize the intangible culture, because within our intangible culture, that's where we have processes which people may call rituals, but these are all for appeasing Mother Earth. These are all for aligning us with nature so that the destruction of nature does not continue. We're talking of global climate change here. Our climate change, as to how our people understand it here, has been like, well, since the colonial system set in. The moment the colonial system set in with its capitalist tendencies, people started complaining because, oh, they are cutting trees, they're going to stop the rain from falling. Or they're shooting so many animals, the ancestors are going to be angry and we won't have any rain. So basically within African cultures, the idea of protecting the land, of protecting Mother Earth, has always been there. It's like in our greeting, I'm well if you're well. If you're not well, I'm not well. So basically we have had this relationship with nature where we have to protect nature because it's the mother and it has to protect us as well. So by using all these materials which are degradable, biodegradable, we're also hoping that even in the creativity of contemporary art, people will take aspects from there and they'll start using that in their creativity. I really like the work that you showed, the work you did of that basket, Fadzai. It speaks a lot, it relates a lot to this architecture here. If only I'd been able to flip my camera so you see the inside of a thatched hut, the roof itself. It's an artwork on its own, which I believe can actually fit in any. So basically that's what we've been doing here at Zimbabwe Arts and Culture Interactions. We're trying to enlighten and bring back our cultures so that we can save our environment. And probably this climate change can be retarded in a very big way. As I speak, we've been having some rains. Probably that's why the network is also kind of low, which we're happy about. And in this season, from about 3 weeks ago, in all rural areas where people are conscious about the culture, there's been some rain petitioning ceremonies. So basically for me, it's like this climate change is also caused by our loss of rituals. The people the world over have rituals towards their seasons. Every season needs to be honored. Every season needs us to do certain rituals with regards to that season. So that season comes to us in a perfect manner. But I think we've lost it. And we may blame it on the industries, yes, because they're distracting that which has always been there. Here where we are, where Zimbabwe Arts and Culture Interactions Trust is located, next to us is actually a quarry mine by the Chinese. They're blasting like granite rock. And obviously within the next like 5 to 10 years, there won't be any hill at all. There will be a big hole. So basically that actually changes the climate. And we as the custodians of culture here, we've been protesting, we've been writing to the government, we've been engaging lawyers. So this is like, what we're doing here is more on a practical basis. It doesn't end with just an artwork that's finished and it goes into a gallery, but we're actually doing the real work on the ground. I could go on and on, Fadzai, so if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them, I think in the other segment. Thank you.
That I'm very excited and hope to come for a residency there and encourage everyone who wants a true cultural experience of making art in Zimbabwe in a cultural environment, to look up Chico and you know, engage that way, because I think it's important, like you've just said, to keep you know, cognizant of our practice, our rainmaking, and our thanking Mother Earth for giving us so much, that we need to keep remembering those practices. And as an artist, I'm quite inspired to work within that kind of environment, because spiritually it is definitely, you know, calming. It's quite difficult making art when you're running around trying to do jobs and add value to the banks and everything else. So I look forward to coming there, Chico. And you said I could build my own space there. That's what you promised me. You said I could come with an architectural idea.
Hello, Fadzai, how are you?
Hi, Butcher, how are you? Good to, I am well if you are well.
Yeah, fantastic. Good to hear from you. Great session so far, really enjoying it. So I will speak mostly about the decolonization aspect, then my colleague Clifford will tackle the curatorial side of things in terms of sharing the kind of exhibitions that we've done over the years that respond to the climate crisis. So, you know, decolonization means many things to many people, but from an institutional perspective, what we imagine is the role of a gallery in a post-independence context. By its very nature, the gallery is a colonial establishment. It was established in the case of the gallery in Bulawayo in 1974. It served to principally advance the colonial interests. Then it means its ethos then has to change come 1980 when Zimbabwe becomes an independent state. So what does decolonizing look like? For starters, there was a gradual process in terms of who gets to work in this space, particularly at the executive level. So over years, you see a gradual change from a predominantly white establishment to more Black people also assuming positions of authority in the space. So in terms of who gets to work in the space, that has also been transforming over the years. So the character of the space now represents the majoritarian aspect of Zimbabwe's population dynamics. Then in terms of who gets to access the space, the gallery has been deliberate about, you know, organizing what we call outreach programs. You know, colonial arts institutions were by design urban in character because that is where the sectors were resident. but the majority of Zimbabweans are in rural spaces. So in the heart of the gallery now is an outreach program which seeks to ensure that no one is left behind in terms of accessing the space. Beyond the accessing, there's also the aspect of who gets to show their work in this space. So you then get to see the artists whose work you are just seeing now and many more of his kind. So there has been that gradual shift in terms of access to the space and who gets to exhibit work in the space. And this has been facilitated through a deliberate outreach program that goes to the rural spaces. And as an addition to that, there is also the catch them young aspect. If you're interested in building local audiences now and into the future, you have to invest in the youth, which is why the gallery has also in its DNA programs that target predominantly children so that you build those future audiences. So then the other smaller aspects are the names of exhibitions. So sometimes we're very deliberate about using local vernacular names to title an exhibition. The trend has been to use English names only, but now we're also very deliberate about also using indigenous vernacular names so that local people also identify with the space, which architecturally is still very colonial in outlook. So there are one or two other things that we then do to try and make the space more attractive to the local common men and women. So those are just some of the attributes, aspects that have been instituted over the years to ensure that more and more locals patronize the space. You know, we have a lecture series which is branded after the name of a late former queen of the people of this city. So all those are deliberate strategies, you know, to leverage on local heritage to build a sense of identity and a sense of ownership in the work that we do. So in as far as decolonizing, it's an ongoing project, but what I've highlighted really is just a bird's eye view of some of the interventions that we do. But essentially, it's all about the access to the space, who works in the space, whose work do we showcase, what language do we use to title our exhibitions, and to what extent do we reach out to the underserved communities, you know, which were traditionally not meant to, you know, patronize galleries. So with those brief remarks, Fadzai, I will then invite Clifford to speak more about the climate change aspect of our curatorial work.
Thank you so much, Buto. And hello, everybody. My name is Clifford Zulu. First of all, I'm a sculptor before I'm a curator for a national gallery. Obviously frustrated by the way the gallery then was conducting its business. I think as artists in Bulawayo, we then decided to take it up on ourselves and decide how the art should reflect, or how a gallery should reflect the arts to its people. So I'm just going to read a short quotation that I just found online by Nina Simone. It says, "It's an artist's duty to reflect the times." I just found that quite interesting. So in terms of activities and in terms of exhibitions, I think Kirsten was just running there a website by a co-curator, Kristen Ayene, who was showing some of the work that we've been trying to put up here at this exhibition. For some that don't know the National Gallery, well, the structure itself is still colonial, so that what Buto was talking about means very few people are still able to access this building because of that colonial understanding. So what we're doing now is to work with artists to try and change that understanding so that our own people can also patronize the gallery spaces. One of the exhibitions that we did was the basket case exhibition that was transforming the traditional basket making process into aesthetic works of art. Probably if Kirsten could put that on the slide, that will show you what the women of Binga in Lupane were doing in terms of transforming They are utility baskets that are found in most of the homes into aesthetic work of art that can now be graced in the gallery walls. And then also we, so that's the slide there. So what you're currently looking at are some of the work that were transformed through a process where there were discussions between visiting artists and local craft producers. So what the gallery in Bulawayo is doing is to go back, like Chico has mentioned, we are going back to the people to find out exactly what is it that you would want to see in a gallery space. So Basket Case has been one of the projects that we've been doing. And then the other project that probably Kirsten will Google and find is the My Beautiful Home, Tomba Indlu Ngobuciko. So there's the page there. Here, we have gone through the outreach program to the rural areas, in this particular case in Matobo, which is in the south of the city. Here, we are encouraging painting of the walls using natural clays or natural pigments. This, we hope, will inspire contemporary practicing artists, say here in Bulawayo and the region, to also begin to like the idea of where we are coming from as a people. We believe if we are able to start from that angle, we should be able to then develop arts and exhibitions that have a saying or a meaning to our people here in Zimbabwe and some visitors that will be coming into the country. And then obviously the gallery works very, very closely with artists. The Visual Artists Association of Bulawayo has been very supportive in the work that we do because it's a pool of artists that we can work with in developing work that has something to do with climate change. Climate change, Fadzai, is something like COVID to us. It comes to us and we just take it from the West, you know, there is climate change and this is what it will do to you in Africa. So it still remains something that we read about and something that we see online. And we do feel the effects of climate change, but we are caught in between the traditional norms and beliefs and what is coming through on our internet and the news, et cetera, et cetera. So we are in a very interesting space where we are still trying to find ourselves. Where exactly, how do we position ourselves when it comes to climate change? I'm aware there is a national strategy response by the government. I know the government has ratified some Kyoto protocols and some other UN frameworks. So we are in that process of understanding and transforming some of the artworks that we are creating. The last exhibition that I'm going to talk about is there's a project called Ngozi Mine. So we've been visiting artists that are working from a landfill or a dump space, like Danisile mentioned, that his supermarket used to be this landfill. But what has happened now with climate change, all the commercial entities have come on board and they have gone to occupy that space. And now they are transforming all the waste from the industry into these new products that are being created and sold. At the same time, they are also kind of like limiting access by visual artists to access some of these materials that they want to use as they create their artworks. That's the brief that we can give at the moment. Thanks, Fadzai, and thanks to everybody.
Thanks, Clifford and Buto, for sharing us information on how the gallery as an institution, arts institution, is pivotal to climate change discussion. I think one thing that I'd hoped you'd bring out is how you've become a sustainable environment or organization during your restoration. Does one of you want to tell us about how you've become more sustainable in your heating system?
We are currently seized with renovations. We have been renovating the space since January. And for us, lockdown has come as a blessing in disguise. But in as far as the ongoing scope of work is concerned, what relates to environmentalism is the fact that we've invested in a solar system which currently provides power to at least 60% of the gallery. For us, that is a game changer. In that it has significantly reduced the conventional power usage. So beyond relying predominantly on conventional electricity supply, it has also reduced the electricity bill on a month-on-month basis. And that is something that excites us. And we have also invested in LED lighting across the entirety of the gallery. So again, in terms of power consumption, that has been significantly reduced. So we are in an urban space. Using solar is one of the few limited interventions that you can really come up with. So the desire is, resources permitting, we go 100% on solar. What excites us is that at least we seem to be one of the first and few public cultural institutions that rely on solar for power supply. So we hope to go full scale, like I said, 100% in the very near future. But for now, those are some of the interventions that we've come up with in terms of power supply and use of a lighting system.
When I was growing up in Zimbabwe, we used to look at solar panels as some sort of weird entity because not very many people actually got and understood that it is a better option for power. And oh, that's the gallery picture there. A very colonial building, lovely looking, beautiful. But I was also drawn to the fact that you said you felt that people felt that the building was a bit colonial, and that sort of made people nervous to come in. Do you think that's just the nature of the building or just the nature of art? Do we think we are including local communities in our art discussions at all? What do you think makes the
it's a combination of factors. The building, of course, is very Edwardian. It can be very intimidating to the common man. And what further compounds the problem is visual art. You know, within the creative value chain, our communities have better comprehension of other art forms such as music and dance. But when it comes to visual arts, you know, you present abstract art, people struggle to interpret and make sense of what is expressed. So within the value chain, visual arts is one of the least popular forms of art expression, which is why then to bridge this gap, this apparent gap, I spoke earlier about the outreach and the drawing sessions for children as well. We are being deliberate about building future art audiences. We are being deliberate about taking art to the people. If the communities are not willing or not capable of coming to the space physically, we will take the space to them, which is why of late we've also been doing a series of interactive art sessions in the communities. You went to the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair last year to commemorate 16 days of activism against GBV. We went to the communities, you know, trying to show people what really visual art is all about, so that, you know, when the work they produce is then shown in this, come into the space, and they get rid of the fear, the stereotype that they have against the space. So it's an ongoing, lifelong exercise, but slowly but surely.
Okay, that's cool. I think that's everywhere. There is an elitist, as we've discussed in the podcast, which is up today, an elitist sort of misconception, or is it it's not even a misconception, about galleries not being for certain people and how certain spaces aren't for certain people. And I suppose to demystify that by being inclusive and looking at more inclusive strategies is probably the best way to educate on some of the conversations that artists can bring up in their work. Sure. Okay, so now we're going to go into breakout rooms. Thank you everyone for presenting your work. If you can look at encountering crisis and how art practice is impacted by climate action and what we can do as artists to have a massive voice For instance, I know in Zimbabwe, it's quite difficult to have protest marches for one reason or another. That's just the system, that's what it is. And it's easier, it's more accessible to march and protest in the United Kingdom. Could a collaboration of wanting what we want to say be heard by collaborating with people marching for COP26 next year? And I also want to highlight that COP is coming to Africa in 2022. So that's why I felt that the climate conversation needs to be brought forward and made aware so that people prepare for that event as well. They haven't decided on which African country, but it's definitely in the discussions. Okay, so shall we do the breakout rooms, Kirsten? This was an interesting session. I'm really happy that we've had sporadic Wi-Fi stops, and this morning I couldn't even get onto my computer. But those are the highlights that we sort of want to show, the inequalities in access to having these conversations. And I'd like to thank Circus and RotU for funding some of the data provision to Zimbabweans so they could take part. Because that's another consideration, is if you want to have a collaborative element out with the United Kingdom, how does it look like? What does it look like? What can you do to support participation? I'm just going on a little bit so that you can have time to add comments. So I'm really thankful that you guys have taken part and you came together and we had this conversation. And we can, have an outlook on how we can protect our climate and our environment from all the invasive politics and everything that sort of makes this world quite complex to live in. I know that COVID has certainly, for me, opened up an opportunity for me to see what the world looks like without planes flying over us all the time. I live by the seaside, so I've seen a lot of dolphins and jellyfish that were never there before. And I hope that the drought in Bulawayo gets some rain, and Chico, we have to do more cultural rain prayers and miras to support our cultural intervention when we're talking to the earth. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking part and everyone who's come to take part in this conversation as an audience or just as a contributor. Thank you, everybody. And is there any other closing comments, Kirsten, or anyone? Just a couple.
Well, I was just going to say thank you to you, Fadzai, because it's really you that have brought us all together and made this link between Scotland and Zimbabwe. And I was going to invite people to unmute and maybe give you a round of applause.
I think we should give ourselves a
okay. Everybody deserves a round of applause.
I think we should give ourselves a round of applause for talking to each other and building connections. That's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. No one wants to go. You're staying. You can stay if you like.
No one wants to go. I don't want to go.
No one wants to go.
Oh, lovely.
Get a drink now. Beer.
No, we need a beer. We need Lion and the Zimbabwe spirit party time. In the times of hard work, hardship, and encountering crisis, we need to keep ourselves positive. And I really miss that spirit, of through hardship and through strife, we will we will encounter as artists, we will manage and we will cope. And we're there to strengthen each other, because that's what I've learned from RotU as a collective. A non-hierarchical way to collaborate is one good thing that Layla has really shown me.